the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 50. Twamna Suranam Twamna Suranam Asisanvayanam Twamna Suranam Asisanvayanam Kutashta Adya Purusha Purana Kutashta Adya Purusha Purana Tvam Deva Sakyam Gunakarma Yonau Tvam Deva Sakyam Gunakarma Yonau Retastwajayam Kavimadadeja Retasvajayam Kavimadadeja Twamna Suranam Asisanvayanam Kutashta Adya Purusha Purana Tvam Deva Sakyam Gunakarma Yonau Retastvajayam Kavimadadeja. Uninitiated devotees, please. What? Yeah, don't worry. I'm not going to leave them out. Go ahead. Vaishnavis? Anybody else like to chant? Anyone? Okay. Okay. So, word for word translation. Twam, your lordship. Na, of us. Suranam, of the demigods. Asi, you are. Sa anvayanam, with different gradations. Kutashtaha, one who is unchanged. Adyaha, without any superior. Purushaha, the founder person. Puranaha, the oldest, who has no other founder. Tvam, you. Deva, O Lord. Sakyam, unto the energy. Guna karma yonao, unto the cause of the material modes and activities. Retaha, semen of birth. To, indeed. Ajayam, for begetting. Kavim, the total living entities. Adade, initiated. Ajaha, one who is unborn. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. You are the original personal founder of all the demigods and orders of different gradations, yet you are the oldest and are unchanged. O Lord, you have no source or superior. You have impregnated the external energy with the semen of the total living entities, yet you are unborn. Purport. The Lord, the original person, is the father of all other living entities, beginning from Brahma, the personality from whom all other living entities in different gradations of species are generated. Yet, the Supreme Father has no other father. Every one of the living entities of all grades, up to Brahma, the original creature of the universe, is begotten by a father. But he, the Lord, has no father. When he descends on the material plane, out of his causeless mercy, he accepts one of his great devotees as his father, to keep pace with the rules of the material world. But since he is the Lord, he is always independent in choosing who will become his father. For example, the Lord came out of a pillar in his incarnation as Nrsimhadev, and by the Lord's causeless mercy, Ahalya came out of a stone by the touch of the lotus feet of his incarnation as Lord Sri Ram. He is also the companion of every living entity as the Supersoul, but he is unchanged. The living entity changes his body in the material world, but even when the Lord is in the material world, he is ever unchanged. That is his prerogative. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, text 3, the Lord impregnates the external or material energy, and thus the total living entities later come out in different gradations, beginning from Brahma, the first demigod, down to the insignificant ant. All gradations of living entities are manifested by Brahma and the external energy. But the Lord is the original Father of everyone. The relationship of every living being with the Supreme Lord is certainly one of son and father, and not one of equality. Sometimes in love, the son is more than the father, but the relationship of father and son is one of the superior and the subordinate. Every living entity, however great he may be, even up to the demigods like Brahma and Indra, is an eternally subordinate servitor of the Supreme Father. The Mahatattva principle is the generating source of all modes of material nature. And the living entities take birth in the material world in bodies supplied by the mother, material nature, in terms of their previous work. The body is a gift of material nature, but the soul is originally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Om Agyanatamanam Desha Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamupakalamayam Dadati Swaparantikam. Could somebody grab me a Bhagavad Gita off the shelf? I'm going to need it later on in the class. Okay, so we're hearing glorification of the Supreme Lord here. And that's not unusual to hear in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's what the Srimad Bhagavatam is ultimately, essentially all about, glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So who is speaking here? Who is doing the glorifying here? We're going to ask a few non-Prabhupada disciples, please, if that's... Who is doing the glorifying here? We're going to give a few quiz questions here to see who's... Yeah. No. That's a good guess, though. It's not Vyasadeva. The demigods. Okay. The demigods. Okay. And it's part of a prayer. They're offering a prayer, and part of this prayer is this glorification. Now, does anybody know why they're offering a prayer? Okay. That's a little... Who said... Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that was... Okay, yeah, I'm going to repeat it. If we go back to... We're in text number 50 here. But if we go back to text 38, which is just before they start offering their prayers, Maitreya tells us about the demigods. They were entrusted with different functions of universal duties and were unable to perform them. See? They offered fascinating prayers to the Lord as follows. So that's the reason. You see, well, I might as well. Maitreya is actually the one who's narrating these prayers of the demigods. Okay, he's speaking to, of course, Vidura, and that's the reason why that's the reason why the demigods are offering these prayers, because they felt that they were unable to perform their duties. So they're praying for the mercy of the Lord. Okay? That's why. And can anybody say, be a bit more specific? What exactly was it that they felt that they couldn't do? What did they feel was going wrong? Does anybody remember that? It's mentioned in another translation a little bit further on, text 48. Yeah. Wow, we got devotees here are paying a lot of attention in the Bhagavatam class, which is really good. Yeah, it says here, this is their prayer. Original person, we are therefore but yours only. Although we are your creatures, we are born one after another. That's figures in there. Under the influence of the three modes of material nature. And for this reason, we are separated in action. Therefore, after the creation, we could not act concertedly for your transcendental pleasure. So, I once heard Prabhupada talk about this verse in a class he gave. I couldn't find it when I tried to find it on the database, but I kind of remember what the gist of it was. The idea here is this, okay? Imagine this scenario. It's the day of before the night when there's going to be a big concert at Walt Disney Concert Hall, which is where the LA Philharmonic Orchestra plays, downtown Los Angeles, 111 South Grand Street, okay? And what's happening is this, that the musicians are showing up, but they're all showing up at different times, and they haven't had a rehearsal. They somehow or another, they just didn't get it, and the performance is that night. The performance is supposed to happen that night. So they're a little bit, they're kind of like, what's the word? What? More than rusty, they're in anxiety, that they're feeling bad, because they understand that, well, we're expected to perform tonight and do a good job, and we just know we're not prepared. So they approach the conductor. Now, I don't know a lot about music, but I looked it up, and apparently the conductor of a symphony orchestra is not just some silly guy. You see pictures of the conductor, and waving around his arms or some little stick or something like that. And I mean, my impression always was, what's this guy doing? I mean, everybody else can play an instrument. He's just waving his arms around. What, is he just kind of like a cheerleader or something like that? No. The conductor is very important. Actually, when I was doing the research last night, and I looked up LA Philharmonic Orchestra, the only name that was mentioned was, it said, right under that it said conductor so-and-so. I won't, So the conductor is a very important person. He orchestrates, they're called an orchestra, and he orchestrates everything. He has different things that he does, in terms of how the composition will be played, what gets repeated, what gets emphasized, etc., etc. Basically, the orchestra can't function properly without the conductor. It just becomes like a bit of a mishmash, So basically what's going on here is the demigods are praying to Krishna. They understand that, we're musicians, like the musician. They know, I'm a musician, I'm here to do but we need the conductor. So that's what's going on here. That's my understanding. The demigods are praying to the Supreme Lord. Okay, we're here, we're getting here at different times, and we all have different functions, but we need you to pull it together. And that's in the next verse here. That's tomorrow's verse. The last verse of the chapter and the last verse of the prayer. It says, the demigods say, O Supreme Self, please give us, who are created in the beginning from the Mahatattva, the total cosmic energy, your kind directions. They want the directions of the conductor on how we shall act. Kindly award your perfect knowledge and potency so that we can render you service in the different departments of subsequent creation. So they're basically praying to the Lord, direct us, conduct us, like the musicians might appeal to the conductor. Okay, call the rehearsal. Let's get this happening so we could give a good performance tonight. That's my understanding of what's going on here. So, and as getting back to today's verse a little bit. So, as I said, that today we're hearing glorification of the Supreme Lord by the demigods. It's being conveyed to us by Maitreya, who's speaking to Vidura, and just to give a little, because we've gone a long ways here in the Bhagavatam, I just want to give a quick recap of how we've got to where we are. So Maitreya is speaking to Vidura. Okay, can anybody tell us how is it that how is Maitreya speaking to Vidura? How does that come into the picture? Does anybody remember how this comes into the picture? Go ahead. Okay, that is correct. Can anybody take it back a step further? How is it that Vidura is wanting to hear from Uddhava? Can anybody take it back a step further? Archita Prabhu. Okay, but Okay, that's also correct. Can anybody take it back further? How is it that we're hearing? Where does Maitreya all of a sudden come into the picture? Because if you remember correctly, before this, Maitreya enters into the picture at the beginning of the third canto. In the second canto, who are we hearing about and who are we hearing from? Okay, I'll give a hint. I'll give a hint, and then I'll let the cat out of the bag. Okay, the hint is Shonika Rishi. That's a hint. Does that help anybody? Okay, so I'll explain that. Okay, so how we get to here is this. Taking it right back to the beginning, you have in the forest of Naimisharanya, right? That's how the Bhagavatam begins. You have the sages in the forest of Naimisharanya, and they wanted to perform a sacrifice to counteract the pernicious effects of the age of Kali. And there's like a bunch of them there. There's a lot of sages there. And they want to perform, I think it's like a 1,000-year sacrifice, if I remember correctly. Okay. So among those sages that were there, one of them was... Huh? No. Oh. Shonika Rishi was the spokesman for the sages of Naimisharanya. Okay, for sure he was there. Who else was there? Yes. I don't know who said that, but Sutta Goswami was there. Now, Sutta Goswami... So what was Sutta Goswami's particular qualification? Yeah, he was present. Sutta Goswami was present when Sukadev Goswami was, instructing Maharaj Parikshit. Sutta Goswami, just a little background information, he's the son of Romaharshan Sutta, and when Balaram killed Romaharshan Sutta, the sages that were present were kind of like upset about that to a certain extent. So they appealed to Balaram to do something to kind of counteract that or make the whole, smooth it all over. And they said, do you want me to bring him back to life? Balaram said, do you want me to bring him back to life? And the sages said, no, you had a reason. You killed him and you had a reason for doing that and you did it with the blade of grass. But do something. So they transferred whatever benedictions, because those sages had given Romaharshan Sutta some benedictions. So those benedictions were transferred to Sutta Goswami, his son. And so long life, etc., power of the senses. So anyway, so he's a qualified person. So he happened to be there. He was there. So, and Shonika Rishi, he was the spokesman for the sages of Naimisharanya. So the Bhagavatam begins by Shonika Rishi addressing Sutta Goswami and asking him, please, you're here, so tell us, Yeah.
The conversation between Sutta and Shaunika is the framing conversation for the whole Bhagavatam. Which actually the whole thing is being spoken by them in the sense that, it'll come back to them every once in a while, all the way through the 12th canto. It comes back to Sutta and Shaunika. Yeah, so it's...
Right, exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
It's just an amazing transcendental literature that there are these conversations within conversations within conversations. And it's all authored by Vyasadeva. So.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening here. Because Shonika Rishi... Sutta Goswami speaking, and if you remember, at some point he starts talking about the creation, and he's describing about the creation in quite a lot of detail. And at some point, when Shonika Rishi felt it was the right moment, kind of thing, and he had the opportunity, he said, "Well, I'd like to. What about Vidura? You mentioned something about Vidura earlier. This comes right at the very end of the, I guess it's the 10th or the 11th chapter of the second canto, whatever's the last chapter. I can't remember the name of it now. What's the name of it? Huh? Chapter 10, whatever the name is, Cause of All Causes, or I can't remember. But so right at the end of that chapter, Sonaka Rishi asks Sutta Goswami, you were saying something earlier about Vidura and Maitreya. I'd like to hear more about that. So then Sutta Goswami goes, yeah, no problem. And the third canto begins by what he's going to tell them all about Vidura and what happened with Vidura, the whole Vidura story, which we've gone hearing. But he's speaking as Sukadev Goswami. No, he just quotes what Sukadev Goswami told Maharaj Bhrgupati. So that brings us up to the present. See, so this, it's, as Judah Karma pointed out, it's a conversation within a conversation. Really, it's the primary conversation is between Shonaka Rishi and Sutta Goswami, and then Sutta Goswami is telling what Sukadev Goswami told Maharaj Bhrgupati about Vidura to he's telling Shonaka, he's speaking to Shonaka Rishi, but he's telling what Sukadeva Goswami told Maharaj Bhrgupati about that incident. And now we're hearing that. So Maitreya Muni here is conveying to us with the demigods, the prayers that the demigods offered. And Vidura is his audience. Okay? So, got it. Okay, so now as far as the text, today's text go, was talking about, Prabhupada makes a number of very interesting points in the purport. And one thing I experienced when I was reading these purports, today's purport, and I experience this a lot when I sit down to give class, that, there's a lot of raw transcendental energy in Prabhupada's purports. Sometimes, like, I'll sit down here and I read it, and I read a sentence and I go, boom. It's kind of like Prabhupada's packing a lot of realizations into these purports, into the purports, and many. I'm going to try to pick up on a couple of them, because there's not a lot of time. But one is that it talks about how Krishna everyone has a father, but Krishna has no father. So it's referring, or not. He's not. There's so many different places in Vedic literature where that point is being made. That, and the most prominent that comes to my mind is, of course, the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam, that Krishna is the origin of everything. He's the cause of all causes. And Prabhupada in the purport here, and of course he, says everybody has a father, Krishna has no father, but then he makes an interesting point here. He says, he accepts one of his great devotees as his father to keep pace with the rules of the material world. But since he is the Lord, he is always independent in choosing who will become his father. So, sometimes he chooses Vasudeva and Devaki, in other parts he chooses somebody else. And then Prabhupada goes on to make this point, for example, about how he's independent. He says, for example, the Lord came out of a pillar in his incarnation of Nrsimhadev. So sometimes Krishna could do anything he darn well pleases. I mean, he could accept as a father, as his point of origin, a human being or a demigod, or, he could come out of a pillar, which he did as Lord Nrsimhadev. And then he gives another example about this devotee, Ahalya. Ahalya was I think she was the daughter of Lord Brahma. Huh? Yeah, she was the wife of Gautama. And what happened was, she got tricked, actually. She was by a river or something like that, and Indra came. Indra disguised himself as her husband, as Gautama Muni, and he seduced her. And she kind of, some versions say she got tricked, some versions say she went along with it, whatever. But Gautama Muni came and he cursed them both. I don't know what happened to Indra. Gautama Muni, the husband, came and he cursed them. She got cursed to become a stone. So she became a stone. And then Prabhupada says here in the purport, Ahalya came out of a stone by the touch of the lotus feet of his incarnation as Lord Sri Ram. So just further making the point that, Krishna is independent. He doesn't need a father. Sometimes he'll come out of a, Vasudeva and Devaki, apparently human person, or some, in the case of Vamanadev, who was his mother and father, Aditi and Kashyapa Muni, demigods. Sometimes he'll come out of a pillar, and sometimes he'll cause an offspring to come out of a stone. I don't know if when Ahalya came out of that stone, she came out as a little baby or she came out as a full-grown woman. Either way, it's showing that Krishna, there's no rules. Krishna makes the rules. He does not have to go according to any rules. About a week ago when, what's his name was here? Radhesham was here. He was explaining about how Hiranyakasipu at one point, he was trying to change the order of the entire universe. He was trying to change, he was very powerful, and he was trying to change the universal order. He was trying to make it so that pious people go to hell and impious people go to heaven and everything. He was just trying to change the whole thing. Hiranyakasipu, that was part of his program, when he was kind of conquered the whole universe. But he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. He was unsuccessful. But Krishna could do it. Krishna could do it. If Krishna wanted to do that, he could do that. He did it in the first place. Krishna's not bound by anything. If Krishna wanted to, he could do what Hiranyakasipu was trying to do. Krishna can do that. Nobody else can. Krishna can. So he's unique. His position is unique as far as that goes. So sometimes there's an expression, sovereign immunity. It comes the idea the king can do no wrong. The king is not under the held accountable to any laws of the land. He makes the laws of the land. You see, so he's not same thing with Krishna. And Krishna gives a reason, but at the same time, and Prabhupada does point out in the purport here. He says here it goes. When he descends on the material plane, out of his causeless mercy, he accepts one of his great devotees as his father to keep pace with the rules of the material world. So he does that, and he explains the reason why he does that in the Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter. And I'll just read a couple of verses here where he does talk about that. So Krishna says, there we go. O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all these 3 planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. For if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So in other words, he's making the point that people follow a leader. He's the supreme leader, and if he didn't do it, it wouldn't take very long and nobody else would take it seriously either. I mean, just to give a very simple example. I mean, imagine here at this temple, if Sravasa and Naikatma, the 2 major advocate, proponents or of the morning program, if they stop coming, well, within about a month you'd have no morning program. It wouldn't take that long. If the leaders stop coming, then it's just a matter of time, and everybody else is just going to say, well, if they're not taking it seriously, why should I? So that's the idea there. So Krishna does it. Now, okay, so right at the end here, there in the last paragraph of the purport, it's talking about how Krishna is the original father. It says here, the relationship of every living being with the Supreme Lord is certainly one of son and father, and not one of equality. Sometimes in love, the son is more than the father, but the relationship of the father and the son is one of the superior and the subordinate. So, jumping ahead here in this canto, I'm going to just read something about that relationship and then wrap it up. There's a loving relationship between the Lord and the living entity, and so much so that when the living entity misuses his free will, comes here to the material world, Krishna comes as super soul, as a friend. And Prabhupada, in the 3rd canto, chapter 15, text 45, Prabhupada says this. He says, as a friend, the Lord is always anxious to get back his friend, the individual soul, and bring him back home, back to Godhead. I didn't connect it so well, but this is an important point. I'll read that again. As a friend, the Lord is always anxious to get back his friend, the individual soul, and bring him back home, back to Godhead. And then further down in the purport explains that when we get back to Godhead, what the experience will be, it says, perpetual bliss and an eternal life full of knowledge or full of enlightenment. You know, that's what you experience when you get back to the spiritual world, an eternal life of blissful enlightenment. See, so Krishna comes as a super soul to the material world just for that purpose, to try to attract the part and parcel back to have that experience. And Prabhupada says in the same purport, he talks about how what the living entity has to do is living entity has to surrender to Krishna. And that surrender to Krishna means to follow the dictates of Krishna. It's expressed in the end of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Sarvadhamam parityajam mamekam saranam. Just forget about all your concocted ideas of what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. Just do what I'm telling you to do. That's basically what Krishna is saying there. Do what I'm telling you to do. So Prabhupada says this about that in this purport. He says, a person in full Krishna consciousness acts by the dictation of Krishna. And this is really relevant to us. It says, in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, the dictation is received through the transparent medium of the spiritual master. So somebody might ask, well, how do you know what the dictation of Krishna is? I mean, Krishna's not here now. There's a couple things in the Bhagavad Gita, but I'm living from moment to moment. How do I know? That's how you know. This explains right here. It's received through the transparent medium of the spiritual master. When one is sufficiently trained and acts in submissive faith and love for Krishna under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, the dovetailing process becomes more firm and accurate. Okay? So then this is really good. This stage of devotional service by the devotees in Krishna consciousness is the most perfect stage of the yoga system. At this stage, Krishna, or the Supersoul, dictates from within, while from without the devotee is helped by the spiritual master, who is the bona fide representative of Krishna. From within, he helps the devotee as Chaitya, for he is seated within the heart of everyone. See, so it starts off, we have to just agree, I'm going to follow the dictates of Krishna. I'm going to do what Krishna wants me to do. How do I do that? By following the instructions of the spiritual master. To start off with, you're just following. You're just sadhana bhakti. You're just doing it. Vaidhi bhakti. This is what I'm told to do, let me do it. But as Prabhupada says here, when you do that, when you cultivate this mood of, what was the words he used? Submissive faith and love. When you do it with submissive faith and love, then you come to this point of, Krishna starts dictating to you from within. So you still have the instructions, but you're getting like additional help from within. You're getting inspiration from within, from Krishna from within as the Chaitya Guru. And it says, Prabhupada goes on to say, this is the highest perfectional stage of the human form of life and the topmost perfection of all yoga. And he also makes the point in another couple sentences. He says, when one rises to the perfectional stage of receiving dictation from the Lord, that is greater than any stage of material achievements above mentioned. So it was earlier in this thing was talking about the mystic cities and everything. So that stage of engaging in devotional service and receiving dictation from the Lord within, that's greater than any material achievement. That's greater than heavenly planets. That's greater than the 8 mystic cities. That you've made it. When you get to that point, you've achieved something that's greater than all those things. And now the really good news. Prabhupada goes in the same purport a little bit further down the paragraph. He says, Lord Chaitanya demonstrated this yoga system, this how to get to that point, in a practical manner simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna. Prabhupada says, if one wants success in practical yoga, it is advised that he takes to the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And he will actually feel himself making progress. So that's the program, for coming to that stage. Just taking seriously the chanting of the Maha Mantra and following the instructions of the spiritual master. And then just one little realization I'll add of my own, and then we'll ask for questions, is that if you experience that, if you're fortunate enough to you're seriously following the instructions of your spiritual master, and you're experiencing some reciprocation from within. It might come in the form of just inspiration. It might come in the form of just a slight taste, or hope even more, for chanting. My suggestion is don't stop. Don't stop. If you're chanting and you're experiencing a taste when you're chanting, don't stop. Keep chanting. Keep chanting. Because it's not like a water faucet. Krishna is not like a water faucet. You can't turn them on and off. In other words, if you're doing something that Krishna's pleased and you're experiencing a taste, keep chanting. See where it takes you. Just try to get absorbed in the chanting and see if you can get, just more deeply into it and get more inspiration and more taste like that. Don't stop. That's my only suggestion at this point. Okay, so I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions? Questions first, please. Dr. Emil, you got a question? Yeah. Questions are always first, and then we could take a brief comment.
Hare Krishna, thank you for a beautiful class. All obeisances to Prabhupada. The question is, in the Hiranyakashipu plan, like you wanted to reverse like
the universal.
Yeah, but is it like the I'm trying to point out the association, the importance of the association. If like you're associated with like pious people, but you're in the land of hell, is in the opposite for the heaven, is actually like the association is so strong, it's so important that actually where you are the lowest planet with pious people, it becomes heaven in a way.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood your question, but I'll try to say something to address it. There's this verse, Narayana Parasarve Nakutas Janabijati, how's it go? Svarga Pavarga, Svarga Pavarga, Apitali Darshana. That for a pure devotee, doesn't matter where he is. Doesn't matter where he is. He could be in heaven, he can be in hell. He's absorbed in serving Krishna. So he's in the spiritual world. He doesn't experience heaven, he doesn't experience hell. He experiences what I read earlier about the perpetual bliss and eternal life full of enlightenment, whoever he is, heaven or hell. As far as Hiranyakasipu went, he was just like, very rebellious, very envious. That's the nature in the material world. Everybody's envious of everybody else. And so that was just his mentality. I can't remember who it was. I think it was David Rod just yesterday. He was saying how, so you asked the question about if the demigods were so fully engaged in devotional service, as was stated in yesterday's purport, why are they in the material world? And his answer was because they want to maintain some control, So in the material world, everybody wants to be in the driver's seat, and that's like an attachment. So they couldn't. So Krishna engages them. They're here in the material world, but they're allowed to have some control. It's under not ultimate control, but they're allowed to dovetail their controlling propensity in the service of Krishna, and in that way make some advancement. So hope that says something to. Okay, Amala Bhakti Maharaj for a brief comment.
Brief as I possibly can. The question comes to many devotees, how do I know that this person is pure, and why should I follow him? Why should I follow what he's telling me to do? Just because it says something in the scripture, does he really realize it? Does he understand it? Can I really get some direction from him? What is the distinguishing characteristic of a person who is a genuine spiritual master?
You want me to answer that? I can answer that. Is that a question, or you just...
Why don't you let me finish?
Oh, okay.
You had you say, let me have a few words.
Well, I'm giving the class. I'm giving the class, so it's not like...
I'm
okay, please,
comment.
Go ahead, finish. Go ahead.
Do you want to give a comment?
No. I thought you were asking a question.
Well, don't
so
interrupt.
as the speaker, I was prepared to answer your question, but go ahead.
Don't interrupt, please. I didn't interrupt your class. Please don't interrupt my comment, okay? That's all I ask. Okay, so getting back to the main point, what is the distinguishing, because many devotees say, well, how do I know this person is real, he's true, he's pure? How do I know I should follow him? The most important thing is that he has no material desires. He doesn't think in terms of, I want food and clothing. These are not desires. Sex, different interests, material concerns. These things are not the things of a genuine spiritual master. His only interest is lovingly serving the Lord, pleasing the Lord, and encouraging others to do the same. Because that's what Krishna simply wants. He doesn't need anything, but he loves to see his devotees offer him things because it purifies them. And when they become more purified, he becomes very much favorable towards them to give them more and more of his love and purity. So this is the most important point, is that he has no material desires. And we can see when Prabhupada was here, there's no material desires. Everything was for Krishna, 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 Krishna. Hey, you couldn't get him to move or talk on anything else, because that was what Prabhupada was all about. Loving Krishna, serving Krishna, adoring Krishna, bowing down to Krishna, surrendering to Krishna, giving everything to Krishna. And if he could get us to do even a fraction of that, he was super successful.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Wonderful comment. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.